Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of December. In December, I was able to get through 16 books, 3 physical books, 5 ebooks, and 8 audiobooks. I really was crushing my audiobook game in December. I definitely listened to some shorter ones as I was trying to check off some of my end of year reading goals. But without further ado, let's jump into the books that I read. I'm just gonna go in order of how I completed them, and as always, I have my book journal to remind me because it is a little bit into January and I feel like once the turn of the year happened, I just have been moving over to all of my new goals for this year. So the first book that I finished in the month of December was Illusionary, which was the second book in a duology. And I thought this book was even better than the first book. And it was really easy to get back into the story. It had been like a month or two since I had listened to the first book on audio. And I just really enjoyed how cohesive this story felt, how developed the characters felt, how it was messy and there's suspense with relationships, and it just made sense to the storytelling and moving the story forward. And I definitely would love to read more by this author because I just found her world building and storytelling very compelling. The next book that I read was an ebook. It was Twisted Games, which is the second book in the Twisted series. I had this one downloaded on my Kindle, and I just wanted a nice, quick, easy read where I knew exactly what I was going to get out of reading that book. So it's nice to have those types of books to read. The next book I listened to on audio from Spotify, it was Adrienne Young's new release this year, Fallen City. This one is not my favorite of her books, but I definitely will read the next book. I believe it's supposed to be a duology, and the next book comes out in fall of this year. It's at the core a war story. There is a little bit of a love story in there, like many of her books. And I really enjoy reading her books because they just fall into so many different genres, and she's one of the authors that I want to move through her entire backlist. I think I have 3 books left on her backlist to be all caught up with her entire catalog. The next book that I listened to on audio, this was a shorter book and it was also nonfiction. I picked it up on Libby. It was called Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think I'm saying that right, but I could be wrong. And this I wanted to finish another one of the Goodread prompts, and that fulfilled that, and it also went towards some of my other reading goals that I'm working on. And really, this is this author's letter to his son about talking about his experience growing up Black in America, specifically as a Black man in America. And I just found it so compelling because it wasn't just like this letter to his son, but it was also like a plea to those of us who don't have that experience to take a look at those broken systems and how they perpetuate this little bit of hopelessness and disenfranchisement. And this is a book that I think is definitely worth a read for anyone. It is fairly short. I think the audiobook was like 3 or 4 hours long, so a very quick read, but just very compelling and eye-opening and interesting. The next book I finished was a physical book, and it was Warrior Girl Unearthed. This is the second book in the Firekeeper's Daughter world, and I really enjoyed reading this book. I think it's one of the best books that I've read in a really long time. It's a very compelling and just very compelling and eye-opening and interesting. The next book I finished was a physical book, and it was Warrior Girl Unearthed. This is the second book in the Firekeeper's Daughter world, and Again, love this author's writing. Also, let's just take a moment to appreciate how beautiful this cover is. So this follows one of the twins, twin cousins from the first book, and it still has that mystery element in it, and I just really enjoyed this author's writing. She has got a lot to say about social issues that are happening, and also I enjoy seeing her perspective come through in this. So again, this is another author that I think is definitely worth the read, and also an author that I want to continue reading her books and her backlist. I think she's now going to become an auto-buy author for me. The next book that I got to, I actually listened to on Spotify. I needed to use up my hours before they rolled over, and it was Legends and Lattes. And I enjoyed this book. It was just like a nice, cozy fantasy book. It's one that had been on my radar for quite a while. And I definitely just want to continue the series and enjoy the cozy times with it. It's a nice like reset book. There's not really a strong plot. Like there is a plot, but there's not a lot happening, and I enjoy that because it's a book that I don't really need to think about as I listen to. I can just enjoy listening to it. The next book was one that I had on hold, and it became available. It is the next book in the Daughter of Sherlock Holmes series. This one is called The Study in Treason. I got this one off of Libby. And this again is a book that, one, I'm trying to finish the series or make my way through this series, and two, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of this book. It has a specific, the series has a specific formula, and it's enjoyable to listen to because again, I don't have to think too hard, but I still get to enjoy that mystery and trying to figure it out as I listen to it. My next book that I finished was another audiobook. I had this one on hold as well. This one was Yellowface. This is another book that has been on my radar for a while, and I finally picked it up on audio. And this was a book that I just wanted to keep listening to because I wanted to know what happened. That it was like slightly unhinged, and there was a bit of a mystery to this story, and there were some parts of the story that like dragged and kind of took me out of it, but overall I really enjoyed my time with this book. The next audiobook I listened to was on Spotify. I think my hours had rolled over at this point, and I wanted to use up some more, or start using mine, so I didn't have to rush to use them up the last minute, and it was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. I came across this book because of the Goodreads challenge, but as soon as I read the synopsis for it, I was like, this is a book for me. It's about astronauts and their experience in space, and it's very like conceptual. So this is a book that I think at some point I definitely want to get a physical copy of and reread, so I can like dig into that conceptual piece a little bit more, and I definitely think I would want to read more by this author. The next book that I finished was The Inferno. This was a book that I had borrowed from my mom. I've already returned it, so I do not have the physical book here, and I wanted to read this book because it is a source material for like a lot of fantasy books and even some fiction that I read, so I wanted to understand that source material and reference material, and then I just also want to expand outside my typical reading and get some more classics in. My next book that I finished was an ebook, To Avenge a Fallen Star. I picked this book up because the author's name starts with Q, and I wanted it for my alphabet challenge. This book was okay. I didn't feel like it was good or bad. The plot definitely had pacing issues throughout the whole thing. I do think this is a debut novel, so I definitely will probably give this author another chance. Plus, there is a sequel to this book coming out in May, I believe, so I will read the sequel to just kind of see what happens with the story and see if some of those plot pacing issues that I found get fixed. But I think it's fun to read debut authors and stuff that's not really on my radar, because sometimes you can find a gem that way. The next book that I read, actually listened to, was another Daughter of Sherlock Holmes book, The Disappearance of Alistair Ainsworth. Again, I knew exactly what to expect out of this. However, this one I disliked, and because it just kept restating things way too often. And then again, the plot was very predictable, and I think that's just not what I wanted when I was listening to it, so I kind of took a break from listening to this series, and I'll sprinkle it in throughout this next year. But I listened to that one on audio from Libby. The next book was also a physical book that I finished, borrowed to me by my sister, which I already returned. It was Problematic Summer Romance. I wanted to prioritize this book because I knew I was seeing my sister and I wanted to return it to her. I loved how messy this story was, and it follows two characters from Not in Love, and I like the being able to see the continuation of some relationships from that book. And it's the concept of everybody at a wedding and stuff is not going to plan at all. And I actually read this while I was sick, so it was fun to escape to a very fun world, and I'm continuing to work my way through Adlai Hazelwood's backlist. I don't think I have that many books left to read. I have just a couple more books on that I read. So the next book that I read was Chris Grimley's Frankenstein. It was a graphic novel of Frankenstein. I set a challenge for myself to read a graphic novel because it's not something I gravitate towards. So I borrowed this on my Kindle, and I actually really enjoyed this. I have never read the Frankenstein by Mary Shelley before, but I just really enjoyed the illustrations. I felt like they brought a lot to the reading experience of this, and the illustration style was fantastic. So I definitely would dabble into more of this artist's work, because I couldn't put it down. I just thought it was so compelling how he used illustration to really tell the story as well as with the words. The next book was another ebook. It was called Zero. I picked this one up because I needed a Z book for my alphabet challenge. This book was so unhinged. This was definitely a book that was pure smut with a whisper of a plot. So if that's what you are looking for, you'd probably enjoy this book. I am reading the second book in the series. Again, it was just so unhinged that I couldn't look away. But I don't think after I finish the next book in this series that I would pick up more by this author in the future, just because it wasn't my favorite writing style. So yeah, it was an interesting time reading that book. And then the last book I finished on December 31st, 30 minutes before midnight, because I was trying to stay up till midnight, was Twisted Hate, which is the third book in the Twisted series. This was my least favorite book out of the ones that I had read, and I did finish the last book in January, but it is my least favorite. I didn't really care about the characters. I found them annoying. I found the plot pretty annoying. But again, I knew exactly what to expect from this book, which was nice. And I got that one as an ebook off Libby. So there are the 16 books that I read in the month of December. I feel like I hit most of my reading goals. I actually finished my alphabet challenge except for a book title starting with J. I didn't quite finish my J book for December, but that's okay. I feel like I did great in all of my challenges for 2025, and I am starting strong for 2026. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.